Okay. So when we originally connected, which I'm super excited about because you know one of my favorite humans on this planet, Chris Brandt, and I'm so glad that he's working with you on your book marketing. And when he reached out to me, he's like, "Hey, I also need to connect you with some podcast folks." The reason I wanted to talk to you on video is so that I can share more about your book, so that we can get it in the hands of more people. I think, me personally, I think the earlier in the career that someone can read this book, the better their career is going to be. Would you say that that is your intention? Would that be true?
Thank you. It's been a book that, well, my students last summer at SVA got a sneak peek in the summer class, and they were definitely like, this is so helpful because it is trying to give that big picture where, you're seeing a million Medium articles, you're hearing about these different like usability and inclusivity, but you don't really understand how to put them together. So like, it's just chaotic when you're trying to learn, when you're like a young like person in the field. So that was like a big part of it, of like, it's a conceptual framework, which sounds super nerdy, but it really just means like, it helps you kind of link things
I
together.
mean, design thinking is a framework. So like if we're teaching that, and like I no longer teach in boot camps, but if they're teaching that as the framework in boot camps, like that's not weird at all. So like introducing them to something other than design thinking
Yeah.
would be ideal.
Yeah, thanks. And so, yeah, as I was going back and saying, okay, is there stuff like this out there? Because it was also, I was just trying to explain what I do. So even working in agencies, even working with other designers, the jargon we use is not consistent. People use different words for the same thing, the same word for different things. Again, there's like things like design thinking, which are much more like a process, but it doesn't tell you exactly what to expect, like at each step of the process. So it was kind of like, okay, we're not trying to be so deliverables focused, but yeah, what is a product designer? What is an experienced designer like doing? And so, yeah, kind of the way that I broke it down into kind of the before and after, the site experience, and then the layers of the 2D through the 4D dimensions gave me just like the concrete structure I was craving. And then it's been helpful for students as well.
What was the initial moment where you're like, "Oh crap, this has got to be a book?" I know you've been consulting for like 20 years, so you've been
Yeah.
in a realm where most of the people that I work with they've never been part of an agency. They've never been a consultant. So tell me a little bit about what that means and like what really sparked that this is going to be a book.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction because yeah, my whole career has been, starting as a freelancer, doing a couple stints at tech firms or small design firms to kind of like learn the details of design. But then, yeah, I do better as a consultant. I'm kind of a generalist. I like having that perspective of working in a lot of industries. And so as a consultant, you're kind of bringing that your own process and this like big picture thinking to a lot of different firms. And you're also so you're helping to like initiate or execute things that don't have the time or don't have the specialty to do. But yeah, so I had been teaching for a while is where this book came from. So I had taught at Parsons for a while, a communication design class, and then also at SVA, this practice of interaction design class. And so I had thousands of slides. And so it was only in talking to other professors that I realized they would show up with like 10 slides and then just like critique the whole class. And I was like, wait, I could do that. I had like 100, like 50 to 100 slides every class, like full of
So you're
text.
over delivering. That's
It's
amazing.
like, I think I'm trying to write a book. I think I'm like I love books. I've like, again, just grown up with them. So it was just something where, and then when the pandemic hit, it was like, okay, now I'm actually forced to like sit at home and do things instead of like going out to events all the time. So that was where it turned. It took about 6 months to get the first draft. Yeah.
Nice. Oh gosh, that had to be so tough.
It was a process because yeah, I had like I think 20,000 words from all these slides, but the first draft took about 6 months, and then the second draft was actually the hardest because that's when I got my editors were wonderful. Sally Kerrigan did the developmental edit, and she was like, "You've actually written 3 books. Like just focus on the middle part, which is the more unique part." And so. And but taking all this feedback of like, oh wait, she says cut this part. Do I believe her? You have to really the second draft took a year just because I had to really rethink the structure of the book
Wow.
and really battle with someone else's like wise opinions as well as my own perspective. And then the last part of I designed it myself. Again, I wanted like full creative control. And so then getting into that plus the copy editing and then the line editing, which I was lucky to have Karen Litherland on that part, that took another year. So it was like a 3-year process. It was like
Wow.
like you wouldn't start something like this if you knew how much work it was. And again, I an art project very much. So yeah, so again, it was a pleasure, and it was like, I'm a craft nerd as well, so I don't mind, I love spending the hours, but it's a lot.
Yeah, the book itself is absolutely beautiful. Like it's honestly one of the most beautiful, if not the beautiful. Like I haven't seen every book, so like I try not to be too absolute like a Sith, but I think it's one of the most beautiful books. It's really a pleasure to actually hold. I'm really glad that I bought the hardback version. Like really and truly, I know when we talked, you're like, ooh, it's a commitment because I think it's like 70, but it's 100% worth it. And it's going to be one of those books that's a reference for forever. And
Right.
like speaking of reference material, how do you imagine that someone might approach the book? Is it a read from cover to cover, or is it pick it up and move to a topic that is directly relevant to what you're working on?
Yeah, that's been something where I see it as kind of a flip through book. There's like the little thumb tabs on it and lots of color coding, so you can kind of find your place easily. Most people read the first part, like the about this book, like the framework, and then kind of pause there. And then you can decide, like, do you want to go deeper? So I think if you are starting out, you might just want to learn one section. So there's kind of 12, again, there's these 4 phases and 3 layers of experience design. And so there's like 12 focus areas. So I think junior designers are really trying to like get their chops. You want to build your skills in like one of them. So again, you're like usability. We do a lot of usability testing at work. I want to make sure I know what I'm doing there. So you could dive into like a chapter. I think as you advance, if you're kind of mid level, you need to start understanding all the things and how they relate. So you might be flipping around, skimming different pieces, like digging into the chapters that are most unfamiliar. And then as like a senior or staff level designer, you need to understand like how to do this from scratch. You really need to be an expert in all this stuff and putting it together and calling in the specialists to kind of execute all these different things. So yeah, I think it really depends on your stage. But yeah, it's very much a book that I was thinking of it as like the TikTok of books, where it's just all of these little nuggets that you can just pick up and like learn one thing and learn one more thing and then learn one more thing, and it's not a linear sort of experience like an older style book. So
Oh, I love that. And the TikTok of, oh man, like, because especially in 2020, it's when all of us kind of turned our attention to, I guess we're locked inside. What do we do now? And we all learned a lot in these minute-long videos. Oh gosh, that's so brilliant. What's your, I know this book is probably like your baby, especially if you spent like essentially 3 years bringing it to life. Would you say that there's a favorite part or a part you just get a little more excited when you're like, oh, let me show you this?
oh, that's really hard because it was all again like kind of surprising because it was me revisiting some things and digging into details. So but the last part of the book I actually like kind of loved, and it was one where what do we mean when we say prototyping? So it's different forms of prototyping. So that was one where just people talk a lot of shit about wireframes. Like I know designers that are like, I don't even do them, they're a waste of time. Everyone like is impressed, feels like, or I won't say everyone, but there is kind of a rush to jump to high fidelity these days. And especially with all the AI stuff, people are like, oh my God, you can just get the AI to just create production ready mock-ups. And so again, kind of showing why low fidelity is important and different ways you can do it, whether it's like gray boxes or sketches. That's like close to my heart and my like hill I will die on of like spending time in low fidelity. I mean, it's been around for 20 years. It's not like I invented this idea, but just giving some more like visual weight and explanation to that. And then the second part of that last part is also on thinking. So that, as like a big nerd, was like really fun too, to think about like what are the conceptual skills you're trying to learn, of like deconstruction, or iteration, all these different ways in which we don't realize that we have a certain mindset that's not working for the work we're trying to do. So that was like that's the one, again, I'd love to dig deeper on, but for this book, it was kind of like just start to think in these ways as you kind of approach the rest of the kind of topical material.
Nice. You just realized like one of the first questions I should have asked were kind of give an early career designer, someone who like wants to make an investment in a book that they're going to use forever. Explain the 4D part. Like how does that relate to an early career designer? How might they apply this knowledge in a way that they can understand?
Yeah, so that's where the idea for the book actually came from, is in my work experience, just seeing everyone, even designers, like really fixate on this 2D layer, right? Like the things we can see, which is super important. And it's this whole career of graphic design. But, what I was trying to speak to was needing to focus, elevate into thinking about the 3D elements of like the devices, the flexibility, the culture that the experience is sitting within. And then really beyond that, I think, strategic thinking is to think about these 4D elements, that it's all changing through time. Some of these things go away. Some of these things have impacts. So really starting to think about time versus just like what's in front of your face. So that's like where the 4D aspect came from. And so I think, again, as we do start to have these tools that can do more for us, like strategy and strategic thinking is going to be more important than ever about why you're choosing to tell the AI to create this versus that. Again, developing these strategic and conceptual skills to help you make good choices so that the designs were not as shallow and surface level.
I love that. Actually getting people into the why of what we're asking for, not just I did this and it was because I was asked to do this and that's how that turned out. Like it's very shallow, like you said. This also is very interesting. Like it just hit me as we're talking, and I'm shocked that as I've read through the book, little pieces, like you said, flipping through, I didn't make this connection sooner, but your strategy or thinking in 4D is very connected to the gamification process, like the experience of gamification. So what they talk about is the not the 4 player types. What am I thinking of? The discovery, the onboarding, the scaffolding, and then the end game. And you're thinking about like, it's not just, we see a lot of really shallow projects from early career designers that are like, it's onboarding. And you're like, onboarding is onboarding. Like at some point, it's the same amount of screens with the same amount of information. Like it's not that unique, but you're thinking like in long term, how does the experience change for a user over time with a product? And we're not talking about cute little apps like, oh, let me buy this little stock on Robinhood. That's what I think of as like a slick little app. But like these are software products that actually enable humans to do deep work.
Yeah. So I think, definitely the time, like thinking about an expanded timeline. I just did a workshop with Creative Mornings, one of their field trips, where it was about kind of making, I call it like a relationship pyramid, where it's about thinking about the first time user, the return user, the member, like the expert. And they're all seeing the same screen and they're all having completely different goals and like reactions to it and use cases for it. So that's one thing of expanding our vision to, not just like, oh, it's, my first visit or my first experience. And then down the road, thinking about I have some sections in the book about impacts. Are there systemic changes? Like I think we're all aware of like dopamine addiction now. So talking about like the chemical impacts, what are the habits you're creating? So again, I think that's something I realized later in my career as a digital designer in particular, is we're creating behavior, right? We're not creating like artifacts. It's not like I carved this sculpture that's going to go sit in a room somewhere. It's gone. It's just pixels. It's just like flickers of light. And so what did you create in the culture, right? What is the behavior? What is the habits that people have? How are they spending their time? So
That was a
like
beautifully way to put it. Like we're creating literally, you just like you sliced in half the word experience, and there's the like little experience I made a screen for you. This gave you a little thumbs up for doing a thing. And then there's the experience of I'm a human with so many things dragging on my time and my energy and my attention. And like, I'm going to chop that little bit out. We got to put that on the internet because like, this is why I know you are such an expert. Not only have you been doing this for 20 years, but like you see things so much more differently because you've got a depth of experience, because you've got so much broad, like you've had it's experience. It's experience. Like the word's going to stop making sense here in a minute, but like, Can you think back to a time when you actually worked with a client and applied this before you had the book, like maybe even the book idea formed, but when you applied a strategy, like maybe something specific from the book, you're like, this went really well?
One that I've talked about is, because it was just, they were like a delightful client, was I worked with this agency called Runyon, and the client was TrueCar, and we were doing this online car buying experience that you could do completely on your phone. So it was like, mobile first car buying, which is actually very inclusive. A lot of people experience a fair amount of discrimination at the dealership. So it was like a good project for a number of reasons. But as we did all this research, we realized that people were getting stuck, even not even figuring out what they wanted, right? And so we realized that we needed to design experiences that helped them figure out what kind of car they even needed, and that would get them to this moment of like, I know what I need. And so starting to see the experience, not just like, hey, you need a car, here's the cars we have, and here's the specs. But realizing this timeline of like, they're stuck over here, and like, what are these moments? So again, we're like I spoke earlier about zooming out to see like longer lifetimes. It's also like zooming way in to see like these moments that are like the flashbulb things of like, I know what I need. Like, okay, now I can go, now I know what model I want, I want a Subaru or whatever, like I want, so these distinct kind of like mental moments. That was one where when we designed features to serve those particular like milestones, those really resonated. And so it was just a completely different way of thinking about selling something online versus like, here's all this information, let me just arrange it really nicely, versus what do you need at this moment? Like, where are you trying to get? And so again, spacing the information out over time. So again, I think that's where it's like that extra access where you're kind of like not just fitting everything on the page, but you're spacing it over time.
Yes. Like information when you need it, not just information for the sake of information.
Yeah. So that's been something, and that's something I do with my SVA students in the summer too, is really think about the like, what are the moments you're creating? So again, that's an interaction design class, and so you design this to-do list, or you design whatever, but is it memorable, right? Does it create kind of like a success moment, or like, oh my God, like, does it create something that people are going to remember later? So really thinking about, yeah, you have to do the user flow, and you have to make sure all 12 screens are there and they're responsive and they've got all the, fallbacks and whatever. But then you also need to take a step back and be like, is it memorable? Did it create like an actual moment that someone will remember?
So interesting that you say that, because a couple of words you used in that last answer made me think of how closely related user experience and marketing kind of are in order to create these sticky experiences, to create things that people feel compelled to use, and yet also weighing the ethics of like, how addicted are you to shopping for a car right now? How many
Yeah,
times did you open this
yeah.
app?
Yeah, it's funny because that's actually became clear to me as I was working on another like blog post about this stuff. I talk about the 4 phases. So to me, that was like, you hear these threads that bring you into the experience. So everyone comes with some context. Then you get like a first impression. If you come back, you get a second impression and following impressions. But maybe you do something, and that's the interaction design, right? That's like the what makes it different from poster design or print design. And then, like I said, you leave, and then there's also like this after effect, this impression in the head. So like those 4 phases are like how I thought about user experience. And then again, the 2D through 4D dimensions are kind of how we start to think about product experience. But I realized that in small teams, you're kind of doing it all yourself, but in larger teams, that's actually mapping to like the different departments of, yeah, marketing is bringing in the people. Are they creating the threads? Are they setting the right context? And then like when you land on the page, it's like, okay, what's the brand impression? What's the feeling? What's the personality you're getting? Then how does the flow work? That's like the interaction designers, the product designers kind of stitching it all together. And then, yeah, like the memories, that's actually the strategy of the thing. Like, did you actually like serve the right moment? Is it like successful? Did it speak to people? So that's the research and the strategy piece that should have come first.
Yeah, right.
And that brings up, that's the other part of the framework too, is that experientially you go from like start to finish, but as designers we often work backwards. So that's like one of the conceptual tools in the book, is working backwards and learning how to be like, where do they need to be going? Okay, let's try to get them there.
Yes, I love that. I do love that part of the book where it's explaining like, hey, we're not just like trying to drive them towards this end state, like herding cattle. We're actually trying to empower them at the same time, while also tying everything into the business needs. And with your 20 years of experience and just like broad knowledge, you've been teaching students, you've been working with clients, you've been writing books. Tell me how much information or how much business a UX designer needs to know at any part of applying this thinking in 4D. It sounds like you know a lot about business, and that's why you understand how all these things tie together.
Yeah, that's a really good question, or a challenging one too, because it is like you can only learn so much. I've always been a generalist, and when you do it for enough years, you can kind of keep track of everything, but you can't keep up to date on the nuances of everything. So you have to kind of play this game of going back and forth of like what you're relearning like each time and who you're working with. So it's tricky. And so business became something that I guess like in the last few years, again, working with Runyon, which has business designers on staff and assigned to every project, I got very used to having somebody doing kind of the model for all the stuff I was designing too. So like you right, you start to think about, and again, as a maybe 10 years into my career, I started to be like, why is some stuff failing and some stuff still around? And you want to design things that are sustainable, right? That last. Like no designer wants to like see their little baby like not survive.
I
So
imagine the designers at InVision are currently like, oh, just soul crushed.
I mean, it's part of just, yeah, we have to accept the ephemerality of our work. Like no digital design is going to last forever. But yeah, it became that thing of wanting, like, yeah, just working at a more senior level. You are working with more of like the executives making decisions. You are dealing directly with the clients, like trying to keep their lights on. I think the earliest thing that was helpful for me there was like the lean startup kind of ideas.
Okay.
And some of these kind of, are you doing tests? Like, is this, are you validating the value of your design as soon as possible? Not even like the visual design, but just the concept in different ways as soon as possible. And then also like pirate metrics. I mentioned these in the book, which are like growth metrics that startups often refer to. So
I have not heard of pirate metrics, and I haven't made it that part of the book. Tell me more.
AARRR. So it's R.
I love it.
Yeah, I forget the name of the guy that coined it, but I love it. But it's acquisition, activation, revenue, retention, and referral. So it's like, do you get people in? Do they do something once they're there? Do they contribute in some way? Do they tell other people? And then do they come back? So if you can make sure that all those things are happening, then that's like the keys to growth. And like I work with a lot of small businesses, but most companies are trying to grow. So if you really ask yourself about your design, is it pushing at least one of those metrics? That's, again, a really simple way to make sure you're adding business value to your design, and you can justify that and make sure, again, this is a sustainable design. So that was really helpful early on. And then later on, again, it became about, more high level strategy of like, yeah, where are we even trying to steer this full ship? Does it all come together,
Wow, that is so smart. And also I was connecting to the pirate metrics and the ship. Where are we steering the ship? And so I was like,
oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Joke.
True. Yeah, but it is. Last point on that too is it has definitely become. My last couple clients have been like, no, we need your business brain, we need your thinking. So it becomes something where, again, I think you can be a designer who's known for their craft, and you are just like magician of visuals, right? Beautiful art direction, beautiful craft. I started to become like, again, I kind of veered off into like strategy pieces. And again, so I've become kind of, now clients are starting to say like, we want your brain on this, we want your thinking. So, and I'm coming back to the craft, and, so I think it's like, again, that play of like where you're kind of loading your toolkit at the moment, but you still have that kind of global perspective on the other.
I also really love that you say you're a generalist. That is also what I claim. Like, I know a lot about a lot of things. I can go deep if I need to, but really and truly just having the breadth of knowledge to say, I have a general sense of what could work for this business. And I know how to ask the questions that I can get validated. And I think that comes from experience. I don't know, maybe you have some ideas for like how an early career person could get started. Is it showing up to the meetings and just like asking questions, taking good notes, and finding out like details? Like, what do you have any suggestions?
I think when you're starting out, it's overwhelming. I think that's, back when I was starting out, it was the reverse. There was not any information. You were like Googling until 3 a.m. trying to find that one comment on that one forum somewhere that answered your question.
Stack Overflow in the early days.
I know, it was like nothing worked and you didn't know why. So it was a different world, whereas now it's information overload, where you're like, who do I trust? Like, I can't learn all of this. You just feel like I should be learning. I mean, I still feel that as a senior person. So I think as a junior getting started, kind of picking the thing you're most fascinated by, that again puts a smile on your face to like show up to, so that again, if you're trying to build marketable skills, it's like, what is somebody going to be able to actually trust you with? As a junior designer, it's hard to be a generalist as a junior designer, because again, you're still building those initial skills. So I think, again, if you're kind of like, well, I know all about accessibility, or I know all about color, or I know all about whatever, I'm really good at layouts. Like, those are all very tangible skills that somebody can trust you to like do a certain type of work. And then, be a fly on the wall as much as you can and start to practice the other things. I mean, I learned by doing, and my whole career I've been like how can I get paid to learn? So I would get jobs where, again, you don't know 20%, you don't know up to 50%, but you know that you know how to learn. And like, you're always having to research. You're always having to, like, if you haven't done something in 6 months, there's probably a better way to do it by now. So you're always going to be like relearning your whole career. So it's fine to be like, I mean, again, there's a lot of hustle culture out there where people just flat out lie about everything. So I'm not saying just make up, but I am saying get something that's a step above, especially like women tend to not like push enough into like, oh yeah, I can do that, you know, so push a little bit beyond what you can do. And then I think also, yeah, find projects, whether it's volunteering, whether it's personal projects, where at a small scale, you can experience kind of the whole scope, right? So you build your own website, it's one page and it's for your dog. It's not, you know, serious. It's just something fun, but that's where you start to kind of see how it works. You have those like, oh, yeah, again, like you start to understand what it's like to be the one coding the website and being like, that image loads really slow, that kind of stuff. Because it's like it's a different world, but I think you also have like so many tools to like make it fun and yeah, have a lot of resources. Like students are so much more sophisticated so much sooner, you know, they have so much more vocabulary, they have some, like, and they're just much more educated at a start. So then it's just, again, I think you have an advantage already. And I think also, like, on a very careerist note, you know, just learning your tools is so valuable. Like, I'm like, why am I teaching students Figma? Like, this is like a brand new app. I mean, Figma's a look, but again, the first couple years it came out, it's like a great equalizer. There's like these new tools and anyone can read the tutorials and be an expert. So again, that's where you can be as good as the experts in like a few months if you just read the tutorials and like learn how to use the app.
Read the documentation. What? Yeah, that's too much to ask. Just kidding. No, that is actually a really specific tactic that people can take to get to be more of an expert than the experts are.
Yeah. So again, that kind of like knowing how to use the software is really like still for a technical career, a chunk of it. So if you're taking the time to, learn, Figma and Framer and After Effects, whatever your niche is, that's very concrete stuff that you can keep.
What have you seen any of your readers or your students, anyone who's applied some of these strategies for 4D thinking? Have you seen them run into any challenges where you were like, oh, that's new and interesting, I haven't run into yet?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking for this. I feel like this is the year. The book just came out last winter. So again, I'm kind of like, this is the year of kind of like putting into practice, because it was, again, it came from my years in the field. It wasn't, I came up with this theory and then went out and used it. So this is the time of like using it and seeing how people use it. But yeah, again, with my students, I guess the most flattering one I've heard is that at SVA, you know, I used this book with my students last year, and that's the interaction design department, and they're like, oh, we're like rethinking our curriculum based on your book. So that's because like
that's incredibly flattering. Wow.
So I was like, that's super nice, because interaction is like the third phase in my model, and so it really, again, I think shows how to relate other things and what this program might be about. So that was like the one where again, it's still kind of conceptual. I still have to get some like case studies structured, but yeah.
Nice. That was my next question was if you have any case studies, but like that just means that we will have more to look forward to in the next few years.
Yes. I mean, I'm just wrapping a couple great client projects, but again, you kind of just like, as a consultant, you just kind of dig in, and this book was kind of like helping to explain how I think, but it's not a 1, 2, 3 of like, go in this order and use it that way. So I was trying to really reflect what the actual creative process is like. It's like, the answer is always like, it depends. Like, one project is an app design, so you don't have to think about responsive design at all. Another one, that's a huge variable. So it always depends. And so the model kind of lets you like jump around as needed. But yeah, the ones that always come up again are relationships. I just did a project, my friend's app, Cara is like an AI skincare assistant. And so that was about, well, wait, what are these moments that people are going to remember? So we created like these cool sharing things where you can take like selfies every day and then like see a video of your progress every time.
Oh, nice.
So again, like creating shareable moments, creating memorable things. And then the relationships one is one I feel like that's its own book of like, a lot of the stuff we design can be so transactional, and how do you think about creating these deeper relationships with your audience over time so they're more like reciprocal, more respectful? Yeah,
I
that's
love that you say that, because that was my next question is tell the audience how they can follow you, how they can learn more, how they can stay abreast of your next 3 books, since it sounds like you've got several in there. Yeah, tell us how we can find out more about you and follow your projects.
yeah. Substack is probably the best. It's thinkin40.substack.com. I'm also on Instagram, thinkin40, but I'm just kind of, getting that going. So Substack is where
I'm required to be on social media, and I guess this is it. That's what that feels like.
Yeah, again, it's like Twitter was always my favorite, and so now it's like I feel like I'm in a post Twitter phase. So it's all
Yes.
haven't quite settled. So I'm still kind of trying the different options, but don't have a consistent one. But again, the Substack is the one where all the book related stuff, you'll definitely hear about, like the free workshops and the lectures and any new releases.
Yeah. Oh, and that's right. I just realized, I don't know that I actually went, I went to click the link. When you buy the book, you get extras. Tell me about those again.
Yeah, so I just with the book, again, it's on my site. I think it's still 60, but the other retailers it's like 75 again, because when you self-publish, it's expensive. So,
Yes.
but again,
And it's a really, really high quality book too. Like,
Yeah,
you did not skimp on that.
Thank you, to like contextualize it, because I saw a calendar for sale that for like $40 the other day. It's like, 250 pages, like versus 12, like, so again, it's just when you put it into context, it's not that much, but
Yeah.
it is an expensive book for what a book typically is. But anyways, to soften the blow, I was like, well, let me give some like Figma templates. So there's like, I think 12, you get the cheat sheets of all the cognitive principles I talk about in the book, and the exercises all kind of on one to refer to as PDFs. And then also like Figma templates for some of the exercises, some of the most common ones I do, just as like starter files to kind of just like they're already there. So
Love that.
So mail your receipt and you'll get those.
Yeah. That is so awesome. Well, I'm going to wrap this up, and we're going to make sure and get this on the Patreon, but also I'm going to stop recording.